Welcome to Galactic Review. While conducting anthropological studies in the PlayStation sector, we've discovered a game called Destrega. Now, before I start the review, let me first introduce to you my new assistant, GameBot X.0. I traded one of those hover bikes I picked up in the Jet Moda review for this robot, so it could help me with the show. Say hello, GameBot X.0.
Hello, GameBot X.0.
Very funny, GameBot. Alright, let's get started with the review. Destrega is a unique type of fighting game developed by Omega Force and published in the US in 1999 by Koei. This game is different from most traditional fighting games, as the fights take place in an open 3D environment, putting more of an emphasis on movement and ranged attacks. It also has a much more involved storyline than most other fighting games. The game's intro animation actually looks pretty good, although it doesn't really explain anything about the story. We do get some nice booby jiggles though.
Downloading images to Spank Bank.
What are you doing, GameBot?
Nothing, sir. Please continue.
There's also a helpful tutorial video that will play if you let the game idle on the menu for a little while. To learn more about the moves and gameplay, I went ahead and started with the practice mode, which is always a good idea when one is available. First, you learn the basics. Move with the directional buttons, jump with the X button, dash with the R1 button, and guard with the L1 button. Once you get familiar with movement, you start learning the attacks. When you're in close quarters with the opponent, you will perform melee attacks. Square is a weak, quick attack, triangle a slower but more powerful attack, and circle performs a sidestep maneuver. When there is a distance between you and the opponent, you will perform ranged magic attacks. Square is a fast attack, triangle a power attack, and circle a span attack to cover wide areas. Each of these magic attacks has a word associated with it that you will hear the combatant speak when performed. Tidu for fast magic, Est for power magic, and Fo for spanning magic.
Sir, does it not get annoying to hear them shout those words over and over again?
Nah, not really, GameBot. I actually think it's an interesting bit of detail to assign magic words to the different types of attacks, although it probably would get annoying if the matches weren't shorter than your joystick, but I'll talk more about the match duration later.
Hey, I have been told my joystick is a good length.
Oh, I'm sure you have, GameBot. You can perform magic attacks as long as your charge bar isn't empty. And don't worry, the charge bar always recharges, and it's pretty fast, so you'll be casting a lot of magic attacks. Additionally, you can chain magic attacks together to achieve more powerful attacks, and if you chain triangle, square, and circle together in any order while your charge bar is full, you will perform a special magic attack. It's also important to learn about the charge dash and the charge guard. When you initiate a magic attack, there is a brief moment in which the attack charges up. If you press L1 or R1 during this time frame, you will engage in a charge guard or a charge dash, respectively. The charge dash works like a normal dash, except you can deflect magic attacks while doing so, as long as the level of the attack is lower than your current charge bar level. The charge guard works similarly, also letting you deflect magic attacks. You can also deflect magic attacks by pressing L1 just before the attack hits you. This requires very good timing, and it will not deflect all magic attacks, just the weaker ones. There's also a charge jump, which will launch you into the air poised to fire multiple magic attacks. Additionally, a mid-air roll can be performed if you've been knocked into the air, allowing you to sustain less damage in the fall.
Excuse me, sir. This seems like a lot of boring stuff from the instruction manual. Can we not just mash buttons and see what happens?
Actually, GameBot, yeah, mashing buttons in this game will work fairly well for you. But this game tries to implement a bit more depth to the combat than that, so I want to make sure I go over all the details. They try to base the fighting mechanics on a rock, paper, scissors type format, and it explains in the manual that magic attacks are meant to overcome body blows counter charge dashes, and charge dashes beat magic attacks. When two magic attacks of the same level collide with each other, one will cancel the other out based on a system of speed beating power, power beating span, and span beating speed.
This rock, paper, scissors stuff is fascinating, sir. But are we finally ready to start the story mode? I want to study the human interactions in the story.
Yeah, GameBot, I think we're ready to begin the story mode now. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a very involved story for a fighting game. It starts off with a voiceover telling a story from the first book of Zamuel. 1,000 years ago, the mysterious and powerful Strega appeared in the country of Zamuel. The Strega shared knowledge with the people of this land and led them to an age of prosperity. Then, stupidly, the Strega gave the people relics that would grant them powers similar to their own. The people used these powers to conquer the neighboring lands, and thus, the entire continent was turned into a land of destruction and decay, and the relics were presumably lost in the aftermath. Now, all these years later, the relics have resurfaced and come into the possession of a man named Zauber. He used the power of the relics to seize control of the land and destroy anyone that would stand in his way, including the Strega. The story mode begins as Zauber is attempting to hunt down the last of the remaining Strega.
Oh my god! The village! Hilda! On Hilda! What happened? Who did this?
Brad. Run, child. You must hurry. Don't let them catch you.
No! Don't do this to me, Hilda! Tell me who did this?
GameBot, I don't think you're going to be learning a lot about human interaction on this one. More like cardboard interaction. Although this kind of cheesy, lower quality voice acting from games of this era never really bothered me that much. In a way, it matches with the low-res textures and general blockiness of early polygonal game characters. Anyway, this guy with the fancy belt is our main character Grad, who happens to be one of the last few remaining Strega. Zauber burned his village and killed his friends for harboring him, and now he seeks vengeance against the powerful tyrant. He is approached by two other Strega, Rosen and Celia, who ask him to join them in their fight against Zauber. But Grad declines their offer, instead preferring to go on his own. Grad is a pretty typical character archetype, following the trope of the young, headstrong warrior who doesn't realize he needs help from others. And of course Rosen, being the wise old man that he is, decides that he and Celia should tail Grad for a while, knowing that at some point Grad will need to accept their help. Naturally, the time comes when Grad is outnumbered, and Rosen and Celia are there to help him. Thus, the three finally join forces to go against the tyrannical Zauber. So the story mode in this game is actually kind of like the story mode you might find in some of the more recent popular fighting games. You'll view a cinematic cutscene that will set up the next fight. You complete that fight, then the story progresses to the next fight. It can be a great way of implementing your story in a fighting game and giving the player a chance to try out all the different characters and learn a bit about them. This is a trend that was popularized in the 2011 Mortal Kombat, with its fun retelling of the Mortal Kombat story up to that point.
Agreed. Mortal Kombat was a good game, and the story mode was a fun balance of cinematics and gameplay.
That's absolutely correct, GameBot, but unfortunately for Destrega, they didn't get that balance right. You could say there's not a lot of gameplay to get in the way of this story. Just by the nature of the game mechanics, the fights don't really last that long. In fact, sometimes they last 10 seconds or less. So you go through about 5 or 6 minutes of story just to have a 10 or 20 second fight. Now the story isn't horrible, but it's also not good enough to justify this gameplay to story ratio. And even if the story were better, that still wouldn't make the story mode more fun to play through. However, despite the severe lack of actual gameplay in the story mode, I still went ahead and played through it to see how it would turn out. Now I might go into some spoilers for the story in the next few minutes, so if you care about that you can skip ahead or just watch a different review.
Sir, do you really think that people will care about spoilers for a mediocre game from the last century?
Well, you never know, GameBot. There's a lot of strange folk out there. So the story progresses and the trio of Strega decide to seek out the help of some resistance fighters led by a man named Team. However, the Resistance saw one of those fake news stories that Zauber put out, which said that Destrega killed the Imperial family. Thus, the Resistance refuses to help Destrega. But Team's friend, Cougar, suggests they may need Destrega's power. Cougar is smart, and he's one of my favorite characters in the game because he's a quick and stealthy ninja. He's a foreigner from another land, gathering information and assessing any potential threat Zauber may pose to his country. Predictably, Team and Cougar eventually join with Destrega to fight against Zauber. However, the story does have one fairly decent plot twist when it's revealed that Rosen is actually working for Zauber. Several other characters decide to take up the fight against Zauber, including Melina, the girl with the jiggly boobs from the intro, and an old war hero named Doyle, who was almost coerced into killing Princess Angie after his son was kidnapped.
Who is Princess Angie, sir?
Well, that's a good question, GameBot. There's a decent amount of characters in this game, and the story mode introduces them all, but some characters get more time than others. And disappointingly, you don't even get to play as all the characters in the story mode. You just get to play as most of the protagonists. In my opinion, Princess Angie is one of the cooler characters in the game, and I would have liked to have seen her fight more in the story mode. Her magic attacks correspond to the face buttons on the PlayStation controller, which is pretty cool. And she has this silly pet thing that always falls asleep on her.
You do not have to worry about me falling asleep on you, sir. I have got a hypercharged energy source.
Oh, good to know, GameBot. I'll keep that in mind in case I'm ever low on fuel.
What do you mean by that, sir?
Oh, nothing. Let's go ahead and skip to the end of the story, where Grad finally defeats Zauber. So Zauber is defeated, and it seems like the story is coming to a conclusion when Celia's long-lost brother, Falma, steps in to confront Grad. Grad wants to destroy the Master Relic which granted Zauber the power to rule the world so that no one can ever possess it again. Falma warns Grad that if he destroys the relic, then all of the Strega will lose their power as well, and they won't be able to protect mankind anymore. They fight, and naturally Grad wins. Then they continue their discussion. Grad argues that the powers of the relics and the Strega have caused too much death, and that humanity would be better off without this power. Falma counters this argument by making the point that humanity would be left unprotected without the power of the Strega. Then Grad says something stupid. He says it's not his place to play God.
It's not my place to play God.
Well then, Grad, if you really believed that, why would you go and destroy this ancient relic that you know almost nothing about, that gives you and the other Strega the power to protect humanity? Doesn't the mere existence of this power and the Strega suggest that there may be greater threats that you're not aware of, which humanity may need protecting from? Falma insists that they must retain their powers and hide the relics away. He also informs Grad that the only way to destroy the Master Relic is with the secret word. And he's not telling, na. But then Falma's sister, Celia, comes in and tells Grad the secret word. Destrega. It's, not exactly the most secret of secret words. I mean, D is a common prefix meaning to remove or negate something. You know, like de-ice or decontaminate. So somebody could probably have guessed it over the centuries. Plus, it's the name of the game, so it's not that hard to figure out. So Grad goes ahead and says the title of the game, and the relic is destroyed, and everyone lives happily ever after, allegedly. If I were Grad, I probably wouldn't have given up my powers by destroying a relic that I know very little about. Seems kinda stupid to me. But that's the story of Destrega. It's not the worst story I ever heard, and it's not the best story I ever heard.
According to my calculations, sir, the quality of the story on its own is 71.2%.
Thank you for that useless information, GameBot.
You're welcome, sir.
You can see they were going for something ambitious here. Almost like the idea was to merge a fighting game with a Final Fantasy type of storyline. Unfortunately, the story mode goes way too heavy on the cinematics, and it feels more like you're watching a movie with periodic 10-second fights thrown in here and there. And sometimes you win the fight, but your character is supposed to lose in the story, so that can be disappointing too. In terms of gameplay, the story mode falls very short, and in terms of story, it's really just mediocre.
Sir, what about all of those mechanics and strategies that you went over earlier? Is there not any fun gameplay to be had with those?
Well, yes, GameBot. In theory, anyway. Story mode aside, the actual fighting in this game can be fun. At times feeling almost like a fight in Dragon Ball Z. You're running around, leaping into the air, throwing energy attacks at people. It can be pretty cool. But the action is so fast and the fights are so short that you don't really have a lot of time during a fight to get into the more intricate mechanics. It's pretty easy to just mash some buttons or learn a few magic combinations that you can spam to win with minimal effort. The special magic attack that each character has at their disposal can be devastating, and it's not difficult to perform at all. A few of the characters seem to have particularly overpowered special magic attacks. I think the imbalance of the mechanics undermines their potential depth of play. You can learn all the more advanced techniques, but in the end, is it really worth it when you can just use simple, effective tactics to win? Now, from an aesthetic standpoint, this game has pretty good graphics for the PS1. The characters look decent and have good textures. The music isn't bad either, and provides a good tone for the cinematics. The overall presentation is fine, and the menus are easy to navigate. This game also provides a number of additional game modes. There's a one-player battle, a team battle, a two-player versus mode, a time attack, and an endurance mode. You'll probably have most fun playing the endurance mode or the two-player mode. You can have some really good two-player fights, especially if you and a friend take the time to learn the more in-depth mechanics of the game. Or you could just mash buttons like GameBot here, which is why he lost.
Hey, no fair. You have played this game more than me.
Oh, shut up, GameBot. The host of the show is supposed to win. You're just the sidekick. So that pretty much covers Destrega. It's an interesting game on the PS1 that was trying to pull off some serious story for an action fighting game. It didn't really succeed in combining gameplay and story the way it wanted to though, creating a mixture more akin to oil and water than, say, peanut butter and jelly. There is some fun to be had with this game, and the story isn't really bad, but overall I don't think it's a game that will keep you engaged for very long. The game just seems to fall short of the goal it's set for itself. Well, that wraps up this Galactic review. Please let me know in the comments below if you think I should keep GameBot, or if I should convert his batteries into fuel for the engines. And as always, if you want to continue to explore the galaxy of media with me, please go ahead and subscribe. Until next time, Captain Shinobi signing out.